Hugh Edwards, of course, avoided jail over the child abuse images that he procured from a convicted paedophile who also got a suspended sentence. And he, in a court of law, it was completely exposed that he paid for this material, that he, then subsequently asked for more, etc., etc. And I just went through a little list. I thought, hang on a minute, right? I'm going to compile a little list of all the people that were banged up for, between a year and 2 years. So this man was arrested, I believe it's called Bradley McCarthy, and he shouted at a police dog, and he got 20 months in jail. Now, this guy, a dad from Newcastle, who was at the Sunderland riot, he got 2 years in prison waving a flag of St. George while standing next to the police frontier. And then this guy, teenager, just a kid, he waved an England flag near a North Yorkshire Islamic centre. He was jailed. That's that man shouting at the dog. This man who is on X, who people will probably have come across themselves, he was jailed as well for posts that he'd made on the platform. And of course, probably one of the most famous cases is the case of Julie Sweeney, who was banged up for 15 months over a post that, admittedly, not a very nice post. Should she have been banged up? I don't think so. And she was a carer as well. So that's someone going without care, as well as her being banged up for 15 months. And you think, well, what could have happened in that court case, right? What would explain him getting a suspended sentence, given that we look through each of these cases here, and we've got this woman being a carer, this man being a dad, waving a flag. Then this guy was also, I believe, a carer. This guy, I think, a father. And this guy's just a kid. He's just a child. And then you think, well, what could have been the mitigating factors that the court discussed in order to come to the conclusion that it did, that this ought to warrant a suspended sentence? Well, this was a piece of court news from inside the court. Now, Mr. Goldspring said there was evidence that Edwards, as in Hugh Edwards' father, behaved monstrously within his family. The chief magistrate said Edwards went to Cardiff University rather than Oxford or Cambridge. This contributed to him being perceived as an outsider at the BBC. And I thought, you duplicitous fucking bastard, how dare you say that? You know, many of us come from problem homes, right? My dad was a drunk. I bet you there are people watching this stream right now who can think of a million excuses they could make in a court of law. But to go and watch video content and procure this material of children being raped, and that be your justification that you didn't get into Oxford or Cambridge? Well, boo bloody who, right? And they talked glowingly about the mental health of Hugh Edwards. What about the mental health of the child who has been raped so that sick, twisted individuals can get their rocks off to this content of a child being sexually abused? I was honestly astounded when I saw that rationale. Like, I'm no lawyer, but I can't imagine that passing muster were I to be a judge in a court of law deciding if there are mitigating factors involved. I was disgusted. I really, really was. I mean, Chloe, you were following some of this as well. How did you feel seeing it all? Do you agree that there is a definite evidence now of that two-tier factor?
I mean, absolutely, there is just no doubt about it. And I mean, I didn't really need any more evidence, to be honest, because we have had example after example after example over the past few months and years of two-tier policing and two-tier justice. Now, on the Hugh Edwards case specifically, you know, I don't think you should just say, no, he hasn't got any mental health problems. I mean, the reality is that anyone looking at that kind of material is probably quite messed up in the head. And most people who do commit horrendous crimes, you know, I doubt there's any, or there are very few murderers in prison that are sound in the head, right? Crime almost always goes along with mental health issues. I do think that courts should should take mental health into account when they make a decision about sentencing. So if someone has like a horrendous one-off psychotic episode and they do something that's fairly low level, then perhaps they can be excused for it more so than otherwise. However, I think that what is clear is that someone who has done something so horrific has been basically let off. I mean, I know
Yes.
it's not completely scot-free. He'll now have a record, but he doesn't have to spend one single day in prison. And I don't think you can use mental health to completely excuse it and say he doesn't have to receive any consequences whatsoever for his action. I think the fact that he's, A, on the left, and B, part of the establishment, I think that has worked massively in his favour. And there's no way that you can say that you can put someone up in prison for 20 months for a Facebook post, but that Hugh Edwards doesn't have to spend a single day.
Yeah. And Alex, I think there's been an attempt actually to, what I would say, someone that high profile who watches this content, and there are the Sun did an expose where they collected a whole load of people similar to Hugh given suspended sentences that had downloaded and consumed something like 1 million pieces of this kind of content, and they were let off with suspended sentences as well. Now, the fact of the matter for me is that surely someone as high profile as Hugh Edwards was, let's not forget he was the one at the very forefront of all of the coverage around Our late Her Majesty the Queen's departure from this earth, and to not make an example of him, but to instead say you're going to make an example of the working class that went out on our streets and said enough is enough after the butcher of these innocent little girls in Southport. Well, you make an example of the working class, but you don't make an example of someone who purchases and procures content that is so damaging to these children. I can think of no more bigger an example of two-tier justice.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what this does is it sends a sign to other potential pedos, quite frankly, this is what we call them, pedophiles, pedos, whatever you want to call them, that this is acceptable and that nothing's going to happen, right? That's what this says. You'll get taken to court, sure, but you're not going to go to prison. You'll be able to stay at home and just not allowed to watch that content again. It's crazy, right? And this is, if we just strip back the heinous part of this crime that this man has committed, and you look at two fundamental things. One, what he is being accused of, looking at content that he shouldn't be looking at, right? And receiving that content from somebody else. You compare people being locked up for resharing content on social media, and you start to see disparity, right? One of those things, most people in this country would vote with their feet. If everyone in this country had a vote, they'd say people who reshared stuff on social media should not be locked up in prison. But they would say that a paedophile who was receiving and paying for images of child abuse should be locked up in prison. That is the fundamental problem. Our justice system is rotten to the core. The law, the guidelines, I mean, whoever wrote these guidelines themselves should be locked up, in my opinion, because they're doing a massive injustice to our once great country. Jim Davidson said this brilliantly. He said, it's all fucked. And excuse my French, but he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Our system is broken. People are fed up with seeing headlines like this, and they should have made an example of Hugh Edwards. And if this government had any balls, it would be standing up. We've only got Tom Tugendhat, for goodness sake, is coming out and calling for there to be to look at this case again. Keir Starmer's done nothing, despite being the so-called ex-head of the CPS. I mean, ridiculous.
And the Reform Party have called on the Attorney General to actually look at the sentencing and evaluate whether it can be looked at again, because it was just in the Magistrates' Court, which can only put in place a 12-month sentence. So if it went to the High Court, it could be longer. Not that the Magistrate Court even put in place a 12-month sentence. But Eunice, Neil Oliver tweeted this, and I thought this was interesting. He said, "Why are you more likely to go to jail for calling someone a paedophile than actually being a paedophile?" And I thought actually that summed it up pretty neatly.
Exactly. I think I made a video about this like a few months ago. This government goes after people that point out the problems rather than the problems themselves. And in terms of Hugh Edwards, I think he got away with one. And the reason for that is that because he's on the political left. If it was like a right-wing guy, imagine if it was Nigel Farage or Donald Trump, they'll be given like a 20-year prison sentence. And you saw the same thing happen with Schofield. I feel like these people that are part of the mainstream media establishment and they are slightly to the left, they have the advantage of not being prosecuted to the degree that they would have been otherwise if they were on the right or if they were an outsider. So that's just another evidence of two-tier policing in this country.
Yeah. Vote Reform says on X, when will the Manchester thugs who attacked the police be jailed? And let's not forget they broke a female officer's nose and left lacerations across her face. It ain't happened yet. How many weeks ago was that now? You're talking, what, 2 months ago?
Months.
Yeah.
Months, yeah.
So that in and of itself is a pretty damning sign. And then Sir Keir Starmer stands up in Parliament and shrugs his shoulders and laughs when Nigel Farage asks Prime Minister's questions about two-tier policing under his watch. I mean, I just find the whole thing totally extraordinary. Some other comments. The fact of the matter is, people are saying that there would have been people that had known this, that he was dodging, that there was an abuse of power. The other people saying this is, well, Sandra says this is shocking, paedophiles walking free.
I think this is also to do with the BBC. I feel like BBC had a part to play in this because he was the face of the BBC. He was the main guy in BBC. And I feel like maybe BBC, they pulled some strings because they didn't want their top guy going to jail for like a few years. And I feel like it's all, again, the establishment and the mainstream media corruption. I really do believe that.
Yeah.
The thing is these corporations, they will do whatever they can to brush something like this under the carpet, even if that means young kids being, abused and exploited. In this case, it's him just consuming content. But, I'm sure you can find cases in other establishments of where, kids are actually being, kids or women are being abused, but they will just keep it as quiet as possible and make sure that nobody finds out because they're more interested in selfishly protecting their own reputation than making sure that vulnerable people are kept safe. And that's disgusting.
Of course.
Can I tell a quick story about this? I just remembered something. Can I tell a very quick story regarding this whole situation? So basically, I have a friend of mine. Obviously, I'm not going to mention his name, but he's super successful. He works for Google. I think he is a programmer there. He used to work for Microsoft. And we've known each other for a while because we used to work with each other as a bartender many years ago, like 10, 15 years ago. And he opened up to me one time and he said that he was actually raped as a child by his own father that used to video him and he used to sell the videos. And apparently, to this day, he goes and sees a psychotherapist. And the thing is, the guy is super successful. He's got 2 properties. He's doing well for himself. And I think he's the same age as me. But because that happened to him as a child, 20 years later, even though he's super successful, he's super depressed. And that's what it does. Child pornography, it ruins people for life. And the people that consume it, they enable that kind of behavior because they create a market for it. And I think Hugh Edwards should be punished because he's a consumer and he's creating a black market for people to go and rape children, video them and sell them to people like Hugh Edwards, which is absolutely disgusting.
So Eunice, I agree with you, and I think that's a really good point. But that's what I meant about making an example of him, right? Because he is so high profile that actually you show that people can't get away with this. Because now the message, as Alex said, the message that's been sent out is that you consume this content and you'll just get a suspended sentence. Don't worry about it. It's absolutely fine. And I think that's the wrong one. I mean, I watched a really good film on child sex trafficking. Alex, what's the name of it? It was a big American film. It was banned.
It was banned in multiple cinemas. I can't remember the name.
It's really good. No, it's someone else. It's someone in the comments is going to tell me what it is. But anyway, it's really good, and I would urge everyone to seek it out. But I watched it in the cinema, and I felt sick to my stomach. And the fact that people tried to ban it, right? They are enablers of this kind of activity going on, and this is what happens. Yeah, The Sound of Freedom, that's what it was called. And it's very, very good, so do seek it out. Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk, and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.